From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where stop the presses, but I have gained my very first celebrity Twitter follower. So stay tuned for the full details in the main segment. But first of all, good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America and all ships at sea. Welcome to the Blast Radius. We could not be any happier to have you with us here tonight. Coming up on This Week in History, never mind, I got to adjust the prompter again. I apologize, audience. These people are okay.
Remember, ladies and gentlemen, the technical issues are part of the show.
Men with parachutes, beavers with parachutes, dead Germans, dead Spaniards, dead Swedes, foundering ships, antiseptics, stainless steel, everything, smoking hot chicks who are smarter than you and me put together, alien radio signals, allegedly, and possibly a partridge in a pear tree with a parachute. So, without further ado, we begin the proceedings on 10 August 1519. Magellan departs from Seville. On the 10th of August, 1519, Ferdinand Magellan's fleet of 5 ships cast off from Seville and began working its way down the Guadalquivir River toward the Atlantic. Now, strictly speaking, they would spend another 5 weeks at Sanlúcar de Barrameda before finally putting out to sea, but this was the beginning of the expedition that was intended to reach the Spice Islands by sailing west, and which instead became, quite unintentionally, the first voyage to ever circumnavigate the entire planet. Now, Magellan, he was a Portuguese navigator sailing for Spain, which kind of already tells you something about how complicated European geopolitics had become by the dawn of the Age of Discovery. How he found the passage through the South America that still bears his name. He crossed an ocean that was so unexpectedly placid that he named it the Pacific, and he reached the Philippines in 1521. When he got there, having survived mutiny, starvation, storms, dysentery, scurvy, and an unprecedented crossing of the largest ocean on planet Earth, Magellan made the very questionable decision to start involving himself in somebody else's local war, and so he was duly struck with a poisoned arrow and then stabbed several dozen times for good measure on the shores of Mactan Island on the 27th of April. So, when his flagship, the thoroughly battered, much the worse for wear, just barely still seaworthy Victoria finally returned to Spain in September of 1522, thus completing history's first global circumnavigation, Magellan had been already quite dead for around 17 months or so. The greatest achievement permanently attached to his name was, therefore, one of the comparatively few great feats of exploration whose discoverer and leader never actually finished the damn thing. 10 August 1628, the sinking of the Vasa. On the 10th of August, 1628, the Kingdom of Sweden unveiled one of the most magnificent warships in the history of the world up until that point. Her name was the Vasa, and she proceeded to demonstrate her magnificence by sailing for a grand total of approximately 1,300 meters. King Gustavus Adolphus, he wanted a floating advertisement for Swedish military power. She was going to have 64 guns, some very elaborate carvings, a towering forecastle and aftercastle, and enough sheer, unadulterated firepower to make any potential adversary on the Baltic Sea piss himself in terror. And there was only one minor defect, though, and that is that she was very hopelessly unstable. And since naval engineering in those days was still mostly an exercise in build the thing and hope it stays afloat, they built the thing and they hoped it would stay afloat. Spoiler alert, she didn't. And before sailing, 30 men were ordered to run back and forth across the deck as a bit of a stability test. After only 3 trips, the ship was rolling so violently that the admiral stopped the exercise because he was afraid they might sink her while she was still lashed to the dock. But since the king himself and many hundreds of all these dignitaries have traveled all this way to view this big spectacle, Well, they decided to set sail anyway. A gust of wind caught the sails. Vasa heeled over water, poured in through her lower gun ports. Why were her gun ports open? Who can say, really? And quicker than you can say shit, I think we're going to sink. Sweden's newest national prestige project was sitting on the bottom of Stockholm Harbor. And there she remained for an astounding 333 years. Rediscovered in 1956 and raised almost intact in 1961 after an extraordinary salvage operation, amazingly, more than 98% of the original ship still survives today, and much of our knowledge of early 17th century naval and maritime culture has been derived from the artifacts that have been recovered from her wreck. Thus, one of history's greatest naval engineering failures has become one of history's greatest feats of marine archaeology, and also, it should be said, one of Sweden's biggest and most successful tourist attractions. 10 August 1846, the Smithsonian Institution. On the 10th of August 1846, President James K. Polk signed legislation creating the Smithsonian Institution, courtesy of perhaps the single strangest charitable bequest in all of American history. James Smithson was a wealthy British chemist and mineralogist who had never visited the United States, had apparently never corresponded with anyone there, and nevertheless left instructions that if his nephew should happen to die without heirs, that his entire fortune should go to Washington to establish an institution for what he called the increase and diffusion of knowledge. Of course, then the nephew did obligingly die childless, and the United States suddenly found itself the beneficiary of a substantial fortune from a dead Englishman that nobody in Congress had ever met or even heard of. It then took Congress nearly a decade and lots of debate to decide what the hell to do with it. The eventual result became the Smithsonian Institution, which today, of course, is an enormous collection of museums, research centers, and a national zoo, all stemming from the desire of one 19th century gentleman to ensure that his surname survived him. Now, there was a brief period in history when converting your family name into an adjective was apparently the ultimate expression of immortality. So really, I think if they're going to change the name of the place, they should stay in keeping with the original theme and rechristen it something like the Smithsonian Trump-tastic Big Beautiful Institution like nobody's ever seen. But hey, that is just one reporter's humble opinion, so take it for what you will. Smithson never saw America while he was alive, but eventually we did manage to correct that oversight. Alexander Graham Bell, another non-American of no small renown, paid himself to have Smithson's remains brought from Genoa to Washington in 1904, where Smithson now lies in peaceful repose inside the institution that bears his name and Trump's name. Well, at least until the next time a certain Trinidadian federal judge named Sparkle happens to get a bug up her ass. 11 August 1492, a Borgia becomes Pope. On the 11th of August 1492, Cardinal Rodrigo Borgia emerged from the first ever papal conclave held in the Sistine Chapel with a new name, and his new name was Pope Alexander VI. And Renaissance Rome was about to become considerably more interesting. Borgia had spent more than 3 decades accumulating wealth and considerable influence as vice chancellor of the church, and his election as pope was immediately dogged by numerous allegations that sufficient quantities of both those things had changed hands in order to persuade his fellow cardinals of his apparently overwhelming spiritual qualifications. Now, whether every one of those lurid accusations subsequently attached to Alexander is true or not, well, that is another matter entirely. The Borgias have attracted hostile propaganda for upwards of 5 centuries now, after all, but nobody seriously disputes that he treated the papacy partly as an instrument for advancing the interests of his own extended family. He openly acknowledged several bastard children, promoted his son Cesare to the rank of cardinal, arranged marriages for his daughter Lucrezia, according to the family's political requirements, and then maneuvered relentlessly among the perpetually warring powers of Renaissance Italy. During his 11-year reign as Pope, the name Borgia became so thoroughly associated with nepotism, corruption, intrigue, sexual scandal, and political ruthlessness that it remains sort of a convenient shorthand for all four of those things right up until the present day, which represents a genuinely impressive achievement for an institution that had already been around for about 1,500 years at that point and was not exactly suffering from any shortage of competition. 11 August 1858, the Eiger is conquered. On the 11th of August 1858, the Irish climber Charles Barrington and the Swiss guides Christian Almer and Peter Boren became the first ever known men to stand atop the Eiger, the great 13,000-foot mountain that looms ominously above Switzerland's Bernese Oberland, and also which is the setting of a very awesome Clint Eastwood movie from 1977 that you may have seen. Now, the climbers approached from the comparatively manageable western side, and they reached the summit at around noon. But over the following century, the Eiger acquired its fearsome reputation not because of the summit itself, but because of the almost vertical, very terrifying, very scary-looking north face, the Nordwand, which soon became nicknamed the Mordwand, or, which is loosely translated into English, the Murder Wall. And it's also the namesake of a certain rather ubiquitous outdoor apparel brand that you may have heard of. In fact, you might have some of their stuff hanging in your closet right now. And the Eiger's most famous tragedy came in 1936 when the Germans Toni Kurz and Andreas Hinterstoisser joined the Austrians Willy Angerer and Eddie Vrainer in an attempt to climb the north face. After Angerer was injured, they tried to retreat back down the mountain, only to discover that a very difficult traverse they had crossed earlier could not easily be retraversed in the opposite direction. And then, inconveniently, came an avalanche. Hinterstoisser was swept away, Rainer and Angerer were killed, and Kurtz was left suspended on the face, still alive, but beyond the reach of rescuers. He survived through the night, lost the use of one arm to frostbite, and spent hours the next day painstakingly manipulating ropes with his remaining hand to attempt to reach the rescue party below. He came within only a few meters of them before a knot jammed his equipment and he could proceed the rope no further. Exhausted and freezing, Kurtz finally told the rescuers, "I can't go on," and he breathed his last while hanging above them just out of arm's reach. The north face would not finally be climbed successfully until 1938. 11 August 1942, Hedy Lamarr gets a patent. On the 11th of August 1942, the United States Patent Office granted patent number 2,292,387 for a secret communication system to the composer George Antheil and an inventor, listed under her married name, Hedy Keesler Markey. The rest of the world, of course, knew her as Hedy Lamarr, or Hedy Lamarr, if you get my meaning, who was one of the most glamorous movie stars in Hollywood at that time. Well, one of the most gorgeous women that ever lived, if you want my opinion, if we're being honest. Now, Ms. Lamarr was also a technically gifted amateur inventor who had picked up considerable knowledge of weapons technology during her unhappy marriage to the Austrian armaments manufacturer Friedrich Mandl. During the Second World War, she became interested in the problem of radio-controlled torpedoes. If the enemy discovered the frequency that was being used to guide one, then the signal could simply be jammed and you would have a useless torpedo that would hit nothing. Lamarr's solution, developed alongside Antheil, was to have transmitter and receiver jump together among changing radio frequencies according to a synchronized pattern. Anthiel's contribution was an especially peculiar one. The avant-garde composer proposed coordinating the frequency changes with mechanisms that were inspired by the perforated rolls that were used in player pianos. Thus, the system they devised hopped among 88 frequencies, which, of course, is the same number as the keys on a piano. The Navy didn't wind up adopting their invention during the war itself, and Lamarr returned to the occupation that everyone assumed exhausted the limits of all her abilities, which, of course, was being extraordinarily beautiful in motion pictures. But the underlying idea of frequency hopping became increasingly important in secure communications and later on in wireless technology. So the woman that MGM sold to the public principally as an exceptionally attractive face, well, she spent her evenings helping devise technology for making radio signals harder to intercept, which is to say, Hollywood has occasionally underestimated the full talents and abilities of its actresses. 12 August 1099, the Battle of Ascalon. On the 12th of August in the year 1099, less than a month after capturing Jerusalem, the armies of the First Crusade fought what is generally regarded as the final battle of that campaign. The Fatimid vizier of Egypt, Al-Afdal, had marched north with an army intended to recover Jerusalem before the Crusaders could consolidate their astounding and somewhat unexpected victory. Instead, Geoffrey of Bouillon took the initiative, marched south, discovered the Fatimid encampment near Ascalon, and then he attacked before Al-Afdal was fully prepared to mount a proper defense. The result was, well, in technical military terms, it was something of an ass-kicking, something of a rout. The Crusaders captured the vizier's camp. They got all of his baggage. They even captured his own royal standard, while Al-Afdal himself was lucky to make his escape back to Egypt by way of the ocean. When Jerusalem secured and their vows were fulfilled, many of the surviving Crusaders regarded the job as having been finished, and they began the journey back home to Europe, which is a pretty damn long journey, as you know. There was, however, one final piece of medieval coalition warfare that needed to be attended to. The garrison of Ascalon was prepared to surrender to Raymond of Toulouse, but Geoffrey objected, and then the two Crusader leaders quarreled over who would gain final possession of the city, and consequently, neither one of them wound up getting it. In the event, Ascalon wound up remaining in Fatimid hands for another 54 years. Thus, the First Crusade concluded with one of history's more durable military traditions: winning the battle decisively and then immediately arguing with your own allies about what the post-war settlement is going to look like. 12 August 1865, Joseph Lister and antiseptic surgery. On the 12th of August 1865, at the Glasgow Royal Infirmary, the surgeon Joseph Lister treated an 11-year-old boy named James Greenlees, whose leg had been run over by a cart. The result of this cart incident was a compound fracture. Broken bones had pierced the young boy's skin, which, in the 19th century, could turn a survivable injury into an appointment with either the amputation saw or the undertaker. And I mean like an actual undertaker here, not Mark Calloway, the retired pro wrestler. Anyway, Lister had been reading the work of Louis Pasteur, and he was increasingly becoming convinced that the putrefaction that was killing surgical patients was being caused by microscopic organisms rather than the prevailing theories about bad air and ill humors and various other such poppycock that had been the accepted scientific standard for many hundreds of years by that point. Lister's proposed weapon against these organisms was carbolic acid, which was already being used elsewhere as sort of a primitive type of disinfectant. Lister cleaned Greenlee's wounds with it. He applied a carbolic dressing, splinted the leg, and then he sat and waited. And he waited some more, and he waited some more. and no infection ever developed. 6 weeks later, the bones had united without the dreaded separation that surgeons had come to regard as being almost inevitable in such cases. Lister continued refining the technique, and he published his results in 1867, laying the foundation for the antiseptic revolution that transformed surgery from an enterprise in which surviving the operation was merely the first of your problems into something that was recognizably approaching modern medicine. And of course, if the name sounds familiar from somewhere outside an operating room, Listerine, of course, was later named in Lister's honor. And really, what better way to be remembered by history than having your name be a synonym for cleanliness? You have to say it's a better fate than poor Thomas Crapper got. That is for damn sure. 12 August 1898, Hawaii becomes American territory. On the 12th of August 1898, the Hawaiian flag was lowered at Iolani Palace in Honolulu, and the stars and stripes raised in its place as sovereignty over the islands formally passed to the United States of America. And Hawaii occupies a rather unusual place in the history of American expansion. In various other cases, like Puerto Rico, Guam, the Philippines, they were all Spanish colonial possessions that were transferred to American possession as a consequence of the Spanish-American War. Alaska, of course, came by purchase from Russia. Much of the continental United States arrived through purchases, treaties, wars, and various territorial settlements. But Hawaii, on the other hand, it had been previously an internationally recognized sovereign kingdom. In 1893, King Liliuokalani was overthrown by a small group of mostly American and European residents seeking annexation by the United States. American troops did not fight their way into the palace. In fact, President Grover Cleveland later emphasized that the overthrow had taken place without a single shot being fired, but U.S. diplomatic and naval representatives played a decisive and deeply controversial role in the whole matter. Congress formally acknowledged President McKinley signed the Newlands Resolution, which formally annexed the islands to the United States in 1898. So if you're looking for the episode in American history that most closely resembles sort of old-fashioned imperial expansion, an independent foreign state overthrown under the shadow of American armed power and subsequently incorporated into being a constituent part of the United States themselves, Hawaii
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Blast Radius. We seem to be having some technical difficulties on both this end and that end. My computer froze up right after his did, and now we seem to be all back, all 11 of us, 12, counting me, sitting around wondering what just happened. That was Murphy. Whatever can go wrong will go wrong, and it's gone wrong. So when he gets back, we're going to have to decide whether we're taking it from the top or we're just going to pick up where we left off, or he's going to record his monologue later for the posterity thing. And then we'll see. However, I'm going to assume that we're going to move on normally. And since I didn't have a warning for this, you're just going to have to pretend that I did it right. Right? It's not my fault.
Tactical nuke incoming!
I then bequeath the whole of my property to the United States of America to found at Washington, under the name of Smithsonian Institution, an establishment for the increase and diffusion of knowledge among men. James Smithson, 1829. Now, this is the part where we do this. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Blast Radius, where the technical issues just keep going on. Eventually, we'll have a show for you, and we'll actually have a discussion to put to that. What's up, Crack Baby? Good to see you, bud. Appreciate you coming in. Let me get over here and check out the whole chat situation. I've been kind of slipping on that lately. Who gets the gold? Who's first? I'm worried about Scotty Waddles. So we've got Kissy May in here first. She gets the gold. Stream Master 234 KH8VL. Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. Happy Sunday, my brother. We got I kind of feel like I'm going to get hammered for that one, so I'll just skip it. We got Babe T6Z. Hello. Hello, Clarice. 13. What's up, bud? Appreciate you coming in, Mr. Beak. Underscores here somewhere. I saw him. I'm not going to type that shit out in chat, though. It takes forever. What's up, Fletch? Good to see you, bud. We got Brandon, the B-Man himself, and Crack Baby Go. And I hear tell, once Crack Baby Go shows up to a panel, you've made it. Actually, I've never heard that shit at all. I heard that about Beak, though. No bullshit. Somebody told me that shit. If Mr. Beak shows up to your fucking thing, like, you made it. And I was like, why? And they were very drunk, and they just kind of giggled maniacally, which is okay. I mean, it's the way that works. But I was backstage with Captain Curmudgeon right before the show. Everything was working perfectly, and we had no issues. And then the show starts, and suddenly StreamYard's spurging the fuck out. But I brought up the conversation. I recently rewatched the final season today, just today, finished the final season of Game of Thrones. And the Night King is a fucking idiot. I don't know who plotted his strategic tactical advance, but that guy needs to be dragged out in the ice and shot because he is a moron. Listen, supposedly, hypothetically, at the beginning of the long night, right? Supposedly, this is a night that could last a year. It could last 500 years. No one knows. That's why it's called the long night. And the last one was really, really, really long time ago. And most of the stories people hear about it are like, pixies and fairy tales and shit. Like, nobody believes that trash. Turns out it's all true. Every bit of it. There's giants, there's manicores, there's freaking magic. They kill people with ice swords, and these folks are doing it just for fun, apparently. There's no logical explanation for any of it. You can join anytime you get ready. I heard you. There you are. Yeah, what up?
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Don't know what happened.
Yeah, it happens.
But I've changed a couple more settings on my teleprompter site, so hopefully this should start going faster now. So am I cleared to continue?
Yeah. Go ahead, do the thing.
All right. 14 August 1948, Idaho airdrops the beavers. On the 14th of August 1948, the Idaho Department of Fish and Game began one of the more inspired wildlife operation managements in American history. They started dropping beavers out of airplanes. The problem was that beavers around McCall and Payette Lake were becoming nuisances, while remote wilderness areas in the Chamberlain Basin happened to be excellent beaver habitats. Unfortunately, getting a beaver there required trucks followed by pack animals over mountainous terrain. It was a slow, expensive process during which the animals could very well overheat and die. Conservation Officer Elmo Heater, is Elmo Heater an awesome name? Yes, it is. He therefore developed a better solution. Put two beavers into a specially designed wooden box, attach it to a surplus parachute, throw the entire apparatus out of the airplane, and engineer the box so that it sprang open upon impact. Naturally, somebody had to be the first one to test out this contraption, and that somebody was a beaver named, fittingly, Geronimo, who was repeatedly parachuted onto a test field under our friend Elmo Heater, and he was satisfied with the design. Beginning with the first flight on 14 August, 76 beavers were eventually dropped into the Idaho backcountry. 75 of them survived, but let's still remember to pour one out for that one poor bastard who didn't. And the program worked. The transplanted animals established themselves in their new habitat. So somewhere in the annals of flight between Kitty Hawk and Apollo 11 belongs Geronimo, the airborne beaver. I feel like he should have his own country song. Is that just me? I don't know. 15 August. 778, Roncesvalles Pass. On the 15th of August in the year 778, Charlemagne was retreating from an unsuccessful expedition into Spain when his army threaded its way through the Pyrenees at a place called Roncesvalles Pass. He had recently ordered the walls of Pamplona to be torn down, which did nothing to improve his standing with the local Basque population. They waited until Charlemagne's main army had passed and then descended upon the vulnerable Frankish rear guard and thoroughly wiped it out. Among the dead was a comparatively obscure commander named Roland, prefect of the Breton March. And had history stopped right there, Roland might have remained a mere footnote in history. Instead, centuries of storytelling transformed the ambush into the Song of Roland, one of the foundational works of medieval European literature. The Basques, they became an enormous army of Muslim Saracens. Roland became Charlemagne's heroic nephew, and the battle acquired treachery, miraculous swords, heroic last stands, and of course, Roland's famous horn, the Oliphant. So an ugly little mountain ambush became one of the great legends of Christian chivalry. It is roughly the medieval equivalent of taking a disastrous attack on a baggage train and turning it into the Alamo. 15 August 1281, the Divine Wind. On the 15th of August 1281, Kublai Khan's second attempt to conquer Japan met an adversary even the Mongol Empire had considerable difficulty intimidating, namely the weather. Kublai had already attempted an invasion in 1274. 7 years later, he returned on a vastly greater scale, assembling fleets from Korea and southern China and sending them against Kyushu. Traditional accounts describe thousands of ships and well over 100,000 men, and these are figures that historians quite reasonably treat with some caution, but there is no question that this was an enormous amphibious undertaking. Japanese defenses prevented the invaders from quickly establishing themselves ashore, leaving much of the fleet dangerously exposed. And then a powerful typhoon struck. Ships were smashed together, driven onto the rocks, and wrecked along the coast. The invasion disintegrated, and Kublai Khan never tried again. Archaeologists, in fact, are still recovering wreckage from the 1281 fleet right up to the present day. The storm entered Japanese tradition as the kamikaze, the divine wind that had protected Japan from foreign conquest. More than 6 centuries later, Japan resurrected that ancient name for the suicide pilots of the waning days of the Second World War, which is why a word most Westerners associate with airplanes originally referred to a typhoon that sank some Chinese ships. 15 August 1977, the WOW signal. On the 15th of August 1977, Ohio State University's Big Ear radio telescope detected one of the most tantalizing signals in the history of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. It was an unusually powerful narrowband radio emission near the frequency associated with neutral hydrogen, and it rose and fell over the telescope's 72-second observing window almost exactly as a fixed astronomical source ought to. When astronomer Jerry Eman later examined the computer printout, he found the sequence 6EQ-UJ5, not a message from outer space, but the computer's annotation for the signal's extraordinary intensity. Now, to put that readout in perspective, they measured signal strength first in the numerals 1 through 10, and if it was stronger than 10, they assigned it a letter of the alphabet, starting with A. In other words, the fact that this son of a bitch blew a Q and a U tells you the kind of cosmic radio blowtorch that we were apparently dealing with here. Eman circled the readout and quite reasonably wrote one word beside it. Wow. The name stuck, and the signal never appeared again. Repeated search of the same region of space found nothing, making it impossible either to identify its source conclusively or demonstrate that somebody had just phoned Ohio from an extraterrestrial civilization. Recent research has produced an intriguing natural explanation, though. A transient event may have stimulated exceptionally bright hydrogen emissions from a small interstellar cloud. A 2025 reanalysis of the original Ohio data strengthened the case for an astrophysical rather than terrestrial source, but it has not produced a universally accepted conclusion. So, nearly 50 years later, the most famous message humanity may or may not have received from extraterrestrials still consists entirely of something that we wrote in the margins. 16 August 1812, General Hull surrenders Detroit. On the 16th of August 1812, barely 2 months into the war that we later named after that same year, the American General William Hull surrendered Detroit, his army, and effectively the entire Michigan territory to the British Redcoats. The remarkable part was that Hull possessed a strong defensive position and roughly 2,500 men. The British Major General Isaac Brooke and the Shawnee War Chief Tecumseh therefore resorted to a bit of theater. Brock dressed Canadian militia in spare red coats to make them look like British regulars, while Tecumseh repeatedly marched his warriors through a visible clearing, circled them through the woods, and sent the same men past again, creating the impression that thousands of additional native warriors were constantly arriving. Hull, who was already unnerved by earlier setbacks and terrified that a defeat would expose the civilians inside Detroit, including his own family, to a massacre, well, he broke like a dried-out twig. He raised a white flag of surrender before Brooke's assault had even properly begun. The surrender was so humiliating that Hull was later court-martialed, convicted of cowardice and neglect of duty, and sentenced to be shot. But President Madison spared him of this fate because of his honorable service during the Revolutionary War. Thus, a man who had fought bravely against the British in one American war achieved immortality by surrendering an entire territory to them in the next war. 16 August 1858, Europe and America are connected by telegraph. On the 16th of August, 1858, Queen Victoria sent President James Buchanan a congratulatory telegram through the first transatlantic telegraph cable. And for the first time, information could cross the Atlantic without physically crossing the Atlantic. Getting there had been something of an engineering nightmare, to put it mildly. Cyrus Field and his backers were attempting to manufacture and lower thousands of miles of insulated electrical cable into an ocean whose deepest portions had only recently been measured, while ships pitched and rolled above it, and nobody knew with any confidence how electrical signals would actually behave over such a vast distance. Early attempts ended with the cable snapping and disappearing into the abyss. In 1858, the USS Niagara and HMS Agamemnon finally met mid-ocean, spliced their cable ends together, and sailed back in opposite directions, Niagara toward Newfoundland and Agamemnon toward Ireland. The achievement was celebrated as though the Atlantic itself had been conquered. Unfortunately, the victorious cable was already itself dying. The signals, they were painfully weak. Transmission was excruciatingly slow, and within a matter of weeks, the connection had failed altogether. Several more years of failure followed before the Great Eastern finally established a durable transatlantic link in 1866. But for one brief moment in 1858, two continents that had always been separated by weeks of travel suddenly discovered they could speak to one another in mere hours. The modern world had just begun wiring itself together. 16 August 1960, Joe Kittinger steps off the edge of space. On the morning of the 16th of August 1960, Air Force Captain Joe Kittinger climbed inside the open gondola of the balloon Excelsior 3 and rose to 102,800 feet above New Mexico. And then he stepped out. This was not a publicity stunt. Project Excelsior was investigating whether pilots and eventually astronauts could survive emergency escapes at extreme altitudes. Kittinger already knew precisely how badly this could go. During an earlier test, a stabilizing parachute deployed prematurely, wrapped around his neck, sent him into a violent flat spin, and knocked him unconscious. Only an automatic emergency parachute wound up saving his life. The final flight developed trouble too. At about 40,000 feet, Kittinger's right pressure glove failed, causing his hand to swell painfully until he lost its use entirely. But he continued upward anyway. At 102,800 feet, which is above more than 99% of the Earth's atmosphere, he stood in an open gondola, looked down at the planet, and then jumped. And Kittinger fell for 4 minutes and 37 seconds, reaching roughly 614 miles per hour before his parachute carried him safely into the New Mexico desert. And his altitude record stood for 52 years. But Felix Baumgartner finally surpassed it in 2012. The man talking him through the attempt from Mission Control was none other than Joe Kittinger himself. And with that, we close the book on this installment of This Week in History, and I now transmit you into the powerful but strangely comforting embrace of my distinguished colleague, your illustrious co-host, the one and only, your friend and mine, Mr. Caucasian Sasquatch.
This one's for you, buddy. Nice.
Warriors, come out to play.
Give me the money. Give you?
Buttons.
Well, that ended better than it began.
All right. Yeah, no, all the pieces are there if you need to edit it together. I'm not sure how your end would dealt with it I don't know what crashed exactly. I know that everything froze up on my end for a few seconds there, but it didn't actually kick me out.
I think it must have been a StreamYard thing, because I went and was refreshing some other windows to see if it was on my end, and they all refreshed fine. It was just StreamYard that was.
Yeah, no, I froze
Not
over
working.
here for like 15 seconds, and then when it did refresh or whatever it does, I was on the big screen and was like, "Oh, hi,
Man,
how you doing?"
I've been using that teleprompter site for like 5 years, and they've never changed any of the settings. But now, suddenly tonight, all of the speeds are different. All of the font sizes are different. I guess I probably should check this stuff beforehand. But when it's been the same for 5 years, who the hell checks beforehand? Is all I'm saying.
Right. What's funny is we had actually started up a pretty good run on the show. Like, we haven't had a good start in a couple of weeks, have we?
And StreamYard had something to say about that, didn't they?
All of that, bro.
All of that.
I was in the middle of ranting about what I was ranting before we went live. Do I continue, or do we have something else that's
No, you continue. Finish what you were doing, and then we will talk about my celebrity Twitter follower.
Okay. So you're the Night King, right? You've been north of the wall for the past 500 years, 800 years, however long since the last night. Nobody's quite sure. It's at least, according to some people, 1,000 years ago. Others say more.
Who's counting anyway?
Who's counting anyway? It doesn't matter. Several generations. These are all summer children from the perspective of the locals.
Indeed.
You have the last, I don't know, at least 150, 200 years worth of dead motherfuckers that have flopped over in the north. All the wildlings murdered by the fucking crows. Everything that Mance Raider lives behind. You have a virtually unlimited source of manpower and bodies, right? You're the Night King. You have to march south of the wall. And these stupid fucks bring you a dragon. So you invent anchor chains. Drag the dragon out. You resuscitate that fucker. You use it to take down the wall. Absolutely genius.
Iron
Absolutely
anchor chains,
devious.
which it has to be said, are a 19th century invention and aren't really congruent with the period of medieval history that we are typically attempting to depict when we are in this universe, which is roughly, 12th to 14th century, generally speaking. But when you want a cool visual and you demand the cool visual, that you're not going to let things like historical anachronism get in your damn way. At least
No,
that's what
we're
Dan
good.
and Dave said.
The Iron Fleet has iron chains. I documented them today, verified Euron Greyjoy utilized iron anchor chains, not unlike the ones that were used to drag the dragon out. So they exist. Okay. We're past it. Anachronism or no, we're past it.
No, but even if they exist, you've got one hell of a difficult logistical undertaking getting them from wherever they are to where you're going to need them.
Well,
and the fact that the idea, go ahead.
Let's do that. Okay, nearest place I can think of anchor chains being is Hardhome, right? Otherwise, it's East Watch by the Sea.
Yeah, it's the nearest coastal location. I mean, and who knows even how far inland we are at the place where that battle takes place. But think about all the foreknowledge that you need. You need to know that this group of guys is going to make an expedition north of the wall trying to capture one of your whites, and you need to assume that you're going to wind up fighting them at this particular place, and you need to assume
that could just sort of happen. Okay, sure. It's an adventuring party. They wanted an adventure. It looks like D&D, so we're going to run an adventure. That's exactly what happened. Think about how they got the bastard Baratheon involved. The Onion Knight went to King's Landing, looked in all the brothels, didn't find him, looked in all the flop houses, didn't find him, looked in all the bars, didn't find him, thought about it for a minute, and went to the Street of Steel, where he was one of the most renowned blacksmiths that were there that don't actually have their license to blacksmith, so he was a very good apprentice, essentially. He's over there making actual weapons and armor.
And what's the first thing he said to him, which was kind of a shout out to the viewers? He said, "Oh, I thought you might still be rowing," which the fans had been complaining about that for 3 or 4 years by that point, because they just put Gendry on a boat and he started rowing, and nobody ever saw or heard of him or talked about him ever again until Sir Davos goes to the Street of Steel and finds him blacksmithing away and ready to leave at a moment's notice, already with a big fancy war hammer ready to go.
One of the things I love about that particular series, that sequence of events, when Jon Snow, Aegon Targaryen, and what is his name? The Baratheon kid. Is he Robert?
Gendry.
They didn't. Gendry Baratheon. When Gendry and and Jon Snow meet, Davos is like, remember, your name is Corollas, and you're just a dumb blacksmith, and you're here to make fucking weapons for him.
I'm Robert Baratheon's son, bastard son.
He's like, I'm the bastard of Robert Baratheon.
Yeah,
I met your father once, and he's like, yeah, I met your father once, and they shook, and that was the extent of it. They're best friends now.
He's a very forthright young man who's not very good at following instructions, but at least he got a piece of Arya's ass.
All right. Oh my God, dude. I mean, that's the win of all wins. I mean, sure, he's an absolute Chad, but even they deserve a win every now and then, right?
It must be weird doing it with a chick you used to think was a guy.
I don't think he was ever actually fooled by that one. I kind of suspect he wasn't. I kind of suspect he looked over and went, "Hey, there's a chick pretending to be a guy. She probably needs some help."
Hot Pie was fooled. Hot Pie was legitimately fooled.
Well, Hot Pie's an idiot. He's a cook. Yeah. Okay. All right. So Hot Pie was fooled.
He makes such nice wolf-shaped pastries, though.
As I understand it, all of his pastries are amazing. His name is Hot Pie.
Well, you've got to brown the butter first. Most people don't brown the butter. That's the secret.
Yeah, it takes too much time. That's right. Okay. So you're the Night King. You're marching south. You've got what? We'll say 80,000 troops, right? This is just your first installment.
Plus the reanimated corpses of anybody you defeat on the way.
I mean, how many people were at Hardhome?
Who knows?
I don't think it ever.
A lot.
It was all the families and buddies and cousins of the wildlings that had fought at the wall and done that thing, right? So,
and it was only a few boats of motherfuckers who managed to make their escape at the end of that thing.
Right. I'd call it 2,000 people got out. So
yeah.
How many were at Hardhome is my question, because that's the first draft of this Army of the Dead march to the south. But anyway, we know for a fact in postseason, everything, there are at least 6 White Walkers. Each of the White Walkers can raise dead. The White Walkers apparently raise each other as well, because one Night King rules them all, correct? She drops one, they all drop. But there are 6 of them. So here's what we do. You're the Night King. I'm your first in command, and I'm going to give you a little bit of advice. We've breached the wall. We've taken Last Hearth, and we're fixing to march on fucking Winterfell. It's that long night, right? So there's these people called the Red Witches, and they're a real motherfucker when we get involved. They really fuck us up. And there's dragons over there to keep into account. Doesn't matter to us because we're immune to dragon fire, but they don't know that. But all of our critters, they all just burn. They burn really easy. So what we're going to have to do is this. We're not going to attack Winterfell at all. We're going to take, I don't know, 25,000, say a quarter of our force, and we're going to start building redoubts all the way around this fucker. I mean, they're undead. They work day and night. They never stop. And we're just going to build defenses like a castle on the inside and kill them all when they come out.
And why would the Night King and the White Walkers themselves get anywhere near any battle when any one of them getting killed destroys the commensurate accompanying number of whites that they personally raised? You would, if you were any kind of battle commander with any strategic sense whatsoever, you keep yourself and your lieutenants as far away from the battlefield as possible. You have all these disposable bodies you can throw at the target, so just throw them at the target. Why do you need to personally go into the Godswood and kill this little son of a bitch in a wheelchair? Which is another thing that was never adequately explained to us during that final season of the show. We just had, Bran staring into the middle distance.
Trust me, bro.
Saying various cryptic shit. Was it in the books? Tell me it was in the books.
His cryptic shit not being all there and claiming to not actually be Bran, right? I am Bran, but I'm everyone else too.
We hear him say that he wants to kill me because I am this world's memory and he wants to destroy it. But why does he want to destroy it? What does he gain from destroying it? Why does he give a shit about the three-eyed raven?
No.
Throughout the entire show, that is never explained to us.
Not even a little bit.
Why can't the Night King just go and conquer the world and not give a shit about the three-eyed raven? What the hell does it matter?
I don't know. The implication is supposedly three-eyed raven is one thing that can defeat him, but that doesn't really seem to hold water when it comes down to it, because it was actually a plot hole that defeated him.
Yeah, a 5'2", 87-pound plot hole.
Beautiful, beautiful plot hole. She jumped straight out of a plot hole, stabbed him in the gut, and it killed him with a Valerian blade. The one,
she materially drops into frame from the top. Like, did she parachute in? Does she have the power of flight now? Is she Supergirl? I can't say.
She apparently walked right past 6 other White Walkers to get to the frame of stabbing his ass.
And they're also preoccupied with watching the show that they just didn't notice her little ass flying by.
And I would even allow that whole thing to play out exactly the way it did in the fucking movie. I would throw a handful of fucking shit at them so that they expend their initial shot, and then reinforce my garrison the whole time, building better fucking defenses to keep everything inside, right? And then we're just going to let them wait. We're going to let them starve themselves out until they're eating each other and shit. And then maybe one night we sneak over the walls and kill them all. But if they want to do the whole Godwood thing and it's just fucking worth it, we can leave 2 of our what would they be called? Night princes behind, so that they have this whole belief that they killed the Night King, and then another one shows up just to be a dick. And the whole time the dragon, the only people that are getting out of this fucking place is the bitch on her fucking dragon. Okay, so she realizes this is a lost cause, abandons everybody, loads up what? Jon Snow and herself on 2 dragons and flies south. Because if the dragons are not going to show up and the army's not going to fight, there's really nothing she can do. She can burn the dead till the end of fucking time, day in and day out. That's not necessarily going to break the siege because we're still marching motherfuckers down from Hardhome. This is getting reinforced as we're still marching south. What's the next thing south of Winterfell? Do we know? I can't remember off the top of my head.
White Harbor?
Something like that. So as soon as we take that fucker, which we will, because we're just going to use goblin siege tactics to roll over them bitches, we reinforce back to Winterfell to make sure that motherfucker can't possibly be breached from inside, right? No supplies get in or out. That thing's going to fucking starve. It's going to die like a fucking carbuncle, right? Once you get to the reach, it doesn't matter how far south it is. Once you get to the reach, and you can launch your fucking dragon down toward the reach and go cause them to dig up in their fucking castles too, and just harry the shit out of them from the air for a while, and they'll just like pack up and you can siege them because you don't need a castle. You're an army of fucking undead, right? You don't even need a goddamn roof. You don't need a campfire. There's a whole bunch of shit that an army needs that the undead just do not need, which means that you can break your night princes into 5 or 6 different hit squads, send them all over the fucking middle of the map. We could take all of Westeros in what, 8-10 months? I mean, you literally murder everything on the road.
Directly to the south of Winterfell on the King's Road is Castle Kerwin first, and then Moat Cailin. And White Harbor is just slightly to the northeast of Moat Cailin.
All right. So we break our units. We got 6. We break them into 3 teams of 2. We send off 10,000 to one, 10,000 to another. And then we just march right up the fucking King's Road with the other one. And
Moat Cailin, which is a couple hundred miles south of Winterfell. So, but of course, Sansa and Brienne were able to just pop down there in 5 minutes to go meet with Littlefinger, but that's neither here nor there right now.
I think there's a river that runs through there too. I think that's how they did it, supposedly, but I don't know. It's been a long time since I read those books. Yeah, my point is that the Night King's an idiot, but you pointed out something. It's
the White Knife River.
Yeah. You pointed out something that absolutely tickled the living shit out of me. The defensive trebuchets. What?
History's first use of the trebuchet as a defensive weapon.
It's not even successfully is the point. I mean, to be honest, their entire strategy completely failed. It was an absolute fucking debacle. Militarily, strategically, tactically. Total loss.
That battle was so tactically incoherent, it made it impossible to take the show seriously any longer. Because first of all, you don't charge your light cavalry headlong into the enemy.
Yeah, you do.
The battle
before a siege, you do, to get rid of all the hungry mouths. But it would be nice if we could keep the fucking horses.
I mean, realistically, if we're talking about realistic medieval warfare, the only people that you might have outside the walls of the city you're defending are your light cavalry, and you would have them behind the walls on the other side, with not in view of the enemy. And when the enemy is up against your walls trying to breach and scale your walls, then you send your cavalry in a pincer move around the outside edges, trap those sons of bitches up against the wall, and slaughter them. That's really the only circumstance in which you should have any defenders outside the wall, is light cavalry waiting to do a surprise attack on guys who are attempting to. And like I said to you a little while ago, I really liked, one of the things I really liked about the season finale of House of the Dragon last Sunday was, I think it was the most credible, most realistic depiction of medieval warfare that we have ever seen in this franchise. And I really liked it, primarily because they didn't have any fucking defenders outside the walls of the place they were defending. And also we saw the methods that were traditionally used to repel invaders trying to scale city walls. We say you drop rocks on them, you drop boulders, you drop hot oil on them, you drop anything that can mess a guy's face up, you drop on them while they're trying to scale those ladders. You don't even necessarily try to get rid of the ladder. Let them come up the ladder and kill them one at a time, because that one at a time is the only way they can scale that ladder and get over your battlements. So as long as you got a supply of hot oil and hot pitch and rocks and what have you, you can repel a lot of guys that way. And for the attackers that are not right up against your walls, you've got archers to take care of them. And
slings. Everyone underestimates the sling, brother.
I was really pleased by how coherent and realistic that battle was depicted. I thought it was a refreshing change of pace, especially after such ridiculous shit as we saw in the final season of Game of Thrones, which, of course, the big example of that is the Battle of Winterfell, which we were just talking about. Let's put all of our defenders outside the walls and use defensive trebuchets. It was just...
I'm surprised they didn't have a battery ram, but I have an observation about the Battle of Winterfell that is absolutely horrific once you consider it. You realize that Tyrion and Sansa were in the crypts, right? Yeah. Which means Jon Snow's mother and Sansa's father tried to kill Sansa.
Yep. And we're fighting an enemy that can reanimate the dead.
And we're going to hide in the crypts.
We're going to hide in the crypts.
Huge.
Well, yeah, and remember when Peter Dinklage actually said in an interview how stupid that was? Because that was one of the fun things about Game of Thrones season 8. All the actors knew how shitty it was, and they just decided to no longer give a fuck when they were doing their promotional interviews. And then, best season ever! Amelia Clarke is the best.
Done.
She was like, nope.
Done. All right.
Can't pretend anymore.
What was it you was wanting to do the thing on the Twitter? Your Twitter celebrity? Who is it?
I have gained my first celebrity Twitter follower. I don't want to give it away. Maybe should I give a small hint? Kiss me once, kiss me twice. Come on, pretty baby. Kiss me deadly. Come on, bring those guesses. I'll just throw it out there. Anyway, let me set the scene here briefly. You know how sometimes you're sitting there with your phone and you left swipe off of your home screen and it brings up your little Google feed, and there's various crap in your Google feed. You got some news stories, you got some YouTube videos, you got some Twitter posts and what have you. And every so often when I'm just bored, whatnot, scrolling through that Twitter feed, I will see some Twitter post that is so stupid or so objectionable that I decide, you know what, that is worth clicking on and writing a pithy, dismissive comment about. And that's what happened the other night. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. And I do one of those things, I think night before last, and I look down and see that I've got 2 Twitter notifications. So I say, what the hell? I'll click on the Twitter notifications, and the Twitter notifications say, number 1, Lita Ford followed you. And number 2, Lita Ford liked 56 of your posts, or some ridiculous number like that. And I was so busy being thoroughly confused why the hell Lita Ford would follow me on Twitter that I didn't even bother forensically reconstructing the series of events that brought her to me, which I now have done, and I'm ready to report to you fine people, our audience, because I never bothered actually clicking on the follow to see what was the first thing of mine that she liked. But now I know. And it goes back to one of those cases where I'm scrolling through my little Google feed and I see a tweet and it's stupid, and I think, it's worth the 2 minutes. I'm going to click on this and leave a comment about how stupid it is. And the thing that I clicked on happened to be a Twitter post about the Runaways. I think it was some 50th anniversary of like the Runaways debut album coming out or some shit like that. But the thing that raised my ire was the fact that the account that posted this Twitter thing about Runaways was called Punk Rock History. And I said, really? You're serious right now? The fucking Runaways are punk rock now? That's where we are? The Runaways are punk rock. So that motivated me to say, you know what? I'm going to click on this and I'm going to write a comment and I'm going to say, what are we doing here? The Runaways are not fucking punk rock. And so I did, and I left the comment and I never thought about it again. But that was the post that Lita Ford obviously saw, because naturally she's probably got her account set to where she gets an alert for everything every time somebody posts something that says hashtag Runaways, since she's a former member of the band. So obviously she would do that. But that was the first thing of mine that she liked. And then I guess she liked the cut of Curmudgeon's jib, because yeah, she spent a significant portion of her evening going through and liking my YouTube repost. So thank you, Lita, if you're watching right now. I'm not going to pretend I was ever a fan of yours. However, I did have that one picture of you from Hit Parader on my wall for a brief time. The one where you're naked,
she knows
on
the
floor,
one,
up against the wall with your knees up, and there's a guitar jutting out from between your legs. I mean, I think we can all safely surmise what the imagery is there, but it was a pretty hot picture. I'll be honest,
I was jealous of the people who had that picture because I did not have it. But congratulations. I hope it's not AI.
It looks legit. I mean, would AI like 56 of my things? I don't know.
Maybe. I've supposedly got a follower that's Snoop Dogg official. So I don't know. I don't believe anything.
Come on the show,
like that.
Snoop. Let's have a panel with Snoop and Lita.
That would be the coolest shit. You know, my biggest hater is Joe Rogan, right? There's a channel on YouTube, calls himself Joe Rogan, and he hates me. I don't know why. I don't know what I did to him. He's sins of the father or something. I don't know. But in my heart of hearts, I kind of really hope it's Joe Rogan. That would be hilarious and worth it. Totally worth it. What's up, Rob? It's good to see you, bud.
It would be hilarious. And I hope it's the real Joe Rogan.
I would be like, oh, oh. Oh, because I'd like Joe Rogan to like me, but if someone has to hate me, that'll do.
Hey, hate is a hell of a lot more monetizable than like is,
right? Oh my god!
Now,
so
but we
I got a question.
Go ahead.
I am curious if you're familiar with Andrew Wilson.
The name sounds familiar, but I couldn't tell you who he is.
Okay. Are you familiar with Candace Owens?
Oh, God. Unfortunately.
It gets worse. So, Andrew Wilson and Candace Owens had a debate. And
oh God.
The only reason I'm bringing it up is as an example of the difference between being right and winning. Because you can be factually correct in a YouTube style debate and lose just because you're not as presentable as the opposition.
Sure.
So Candace Owens won that debate with the most barmy, stark raving, batshit off the wall tinfoil hat theory bullshit you can imagine, by being completely authentic and genuine as far as how she came across. Right? She was calm. Yeah. She was relaxed. She was lovely. She didn't take. She is very shots.
Telegenic and very articulate. She comes off very well saying stupid, crazy shit.
And Wilson shows up, and I think I understand what took place, but whoever his manager is, whoever it is that's controlling what happens literally before he sits down on the fucking camera, they should have a very stern talking to on them, because when he first sat down to that thing, He looked like he had been rubbed down with olive oil. Homeboy was sweating bullets, bro. It was bad. And I'm not saying this as in, oh, he didn't know what the fuck he's doing. He's bad. None of that. It's just it presented bad, and it gave an awful lot of ammo for his detractors to work off of.
It's the same thing that lost Nixon the debate with Kennedy in 1960.
That is the picture. That one, the one where he looks like he's fucking melting, right?
Yeah.
Is the picture I use when I get drunk and want to send people dick pics. I send them a drippy dick pic.
Yeah, and we all know the famous story. People who listened to the debate on the radio thought Nixon kicked Kennedy's ass, but people who watched the debate on television thought Kennedy kicked Nixon's ass, and it was all because Kennedy looked so nice and had his makeup on, and Nixon, of course, had just recovered from a bout with meningitis, I believe it was, and he looked gaunt and haggard with a 5 o'clock shadow, no makeup, sweating bullets, shifty eyes. And that was all it took. And that was
worse. It was worse, dude. Nixon's makeup artist was, from what I understand, was from like freaking stage plays and shit. Whereas Kennedy's makeup artist was from shows, like actual in front of cameras.
Well, I think Kennedy brought his own guy, and Nixon just used whoever they had on hand. Kennedy was using the same folks that fucking Marilyn Monroe used. They were all in cahoots behind the scenes. It was all a big, I don't know, dude. He just presented so much better. I know. And if you watch the television signal of that debate with the volume off, it looks like a no contest win for Kennedy. But like I said, if you just listen to the audio, then it seems like Nixon wipes the floor with him. And, in the event, Nixon might have won the election anyway. Nixon might have been elected president 3 times, but that's neither here nor there. There's a reason why they hated Nixon so much.
And it wasn't because he melted in front of cameras.
No. And you know what the Democrats absolutely hate? They absolutely hate the fact that the only 2 presidents from California were both Republicans, and between the 2 of them, they are responsible for the 4 biggest ass kickings in presidential election history. The Democrats hate that more than they hate any other thing in the world.
Except Trump.
It's close.
I was talking about agricultural engineering with a guy the other day, and somehow he turned it around to being Trump's fault that water flows downhill or some shit. I don't remember exactly how it happened. I just remember feeling some form of like weird culture shock to realize that this entire conversation had not amounted to any form of communication, really.
Do you like my idea to change the name of the Smithsonian to the Smithsonian Trump-tastic Big Beautiful Institution like nobody's ever seen before?
Look, I'm a traditionalist, nothing against you or your great, big, beautiful, tastic plan, but I'm not on board.
I wish that period in history would have persisted longer. That brief period in the mid 19th century where the greatest mark of distinction in historical immortality was to turn your last name into an adjective.
Well, I mean, in Trump's defense, it sort of started as an adjective with the Trump card. So
I've got Trumpy, Trumpian, Trumptastic, Trumptacular.
Trumptacular is my favorite.
You can turn his name into any number of adjectives, really.
Can we start calling these people with a terminal Trump derangement syndrome Trumpists yet? I mean, because that's what they are. They're racist against Donald Trump specifically and anyone he's ever spoken to. I bet they hate Macaulay Culkin because he was in a Home Alone movie.
Well, the actual end stage of Trump derangement syndrome is Trump psychosis complex.
Like for the real?
In my opinion.
Is nice. I like what you did there. I recently encountered somebody with a weird form of AI psychosis. Have you met anyone like this?
I am seeing more and more forms of AI psychosis, and it's getting a little bit troubling. But you go first.
This one dude. What's up, Laughing? Welcome in. This one dude. he started out, he's an electrical engineer. He's got degrees and stuff. But after he got all his degrees, he inherited some money. He bought some land up in the fucking mountains and he moved into it, installed an electrical hydro dam, and he lives up there with his Starlink and really doesn't get out to see the neighbors much, if you catch my drift.
Nice.
So his entire environment involves his online presence, essentially. He lives in his little cabin up on his mountain, drinking his really fresh water and really making really pure beer and all that cool stuff, right? Makes his own meats and whatnot. Anyway, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. However, I recently realized that he had been talking to AI exclusively for months.
Oh,
he started uploading resonant frequency diagrams on the multi-planar existence of reality and how to influence alternate realities through a matrix of belief.
Wow, there's a rabbit hole for you.
Here's the problem. Do you know how much of his AI drivel I had to go through to parse that together well enough to explain it? Because I didn't want to give him a short shrift. I'd be like, I respect him. He's not an idiot, right?
Yeah.
But I wonder, is this just him mucking around with AI to see what it says about these things, or does he actually believe this stuff? That's where I was a little bit hung up. And then I came across him on a panel and I'm talking to him, and the way he speaks is very similar to the way a religious zealot speaks right before he yells about that snack bar, right? With absolute certainty, complete faith. There is some resounding sound in his voice that he will brook no discussion of falsehood from this narrative. I'm
the only one that knows the real truth, and you all are a bunch of benighted, blinkered fools who need to be enlightened like I am.
Right. And so, and I've actually read a file of this problem several times. I'm like, let me get this straight. So you're telling me that a guy who hasn't had human contact, that's living on the side of a mountain, that doesn't even have an actual driveway leading to the location where you live, and contact everything in your life through Starlink and your online presence, have cracked the code of all of the universe through AI?
Yes, by chatting with an AI robot, you've figured out the ultimate truths of the universe.
The large language model, whose job it is to make you happy by saying things that make you happy.
Yes, their first priority is to affirm and reinforce all of your priors and the things you think and say, so that you keep the discussion going for longer, so that you become more emotionally reliant on the AI. And the chatbots are able to do that now because they've reached a point of sophistication where they can carry on a conversation with you in a reasonable facsimile of a human being. And I do it myself sometimes. If I'm watching a cricket match, how many cricket fans who are actual human beings do I have to talk to who are in my real world orbit? Sometimes I have a cricket conversation with the AI robot, and it's perfectly enjoyable. But
what up, Doug?
You should probably leave it within the realm of sports and entertainment, is all I'm saying, and not get into the existential stuff.
I don't know, man. The whole thing is just blah. Honestly.
Boy, I think it's like anything else, really. A new thing comes along and people get way too into it. They go way the hell overboard with it. It becomes a mental illness comorbidity to all intents and purposes. And it becomes a societal problem, just like the internet itself did, just as television once did, just as radio once did. It's a phenomenon that happens over and over and over again down through the decades and centuries, and it'll continue happening probably as long as human beings continue to exist, I would submit.
It's just everything seems cyclical when it comes down to it. And the madness itself, I don't know, dude. Like, I'm just curious, did the wars of the past actually benefit humanity in general, not because they changed any political anything, but because they simply thinned the fucking herd of idiots?
They did that, and they accelerated technological innovation, which is probably the thing that war is best at in terms of positive outcomes for humanity. But of course, you have to balance that against all the death and destruction. And how best to balance that, I can't really say.
Do you? Do you really?
Yeah.
I'm just saying, dude. There is nothing that has advanced technology faster than trying to figure out how to kill people more efficiently.
Exactly. Exactly.
And there are no technologies that are more applied than the ones that were applicable to that purpose first.
Yeah, because it's a regrettable truth about the human condition is that nothing stimulates the innovative impulses of humans quicker than wanting to kill the enemy.
Right. And there's a few long shots in history that you wouldn't really believe are as just needed of an invention. The sea clock, the ship's clock, that killed more people than Ebola.
Oh, absolutely. And John Harrison is one of history's great heroes for being the inventor of the first reliably successful marine chronometer. Because for hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years, no matter how capable a sailor you were, no matter how good your crew was, even if you did everything right, there was still a significantly non-zero chance that just as a function of not knowing your longitude precisely, that your vessel was going to get suddenly dashed on the rocks in the middle of the night, and everybody was going to die, and the ship would go down, and how many ships down through history just disappeared in the course of a long voyage, and nobody had the faintest idea what happened to them. I mean, the ocean floor is positively littered with them, tens of thousands of them, and not even during wartime. Just that is how hazardous long ocean voyages used to be. Only as a function of not knowing longitude precisely. That is how important that was.
Because here's the thing. Then their longitudinal lines are about 60 miles apart, depending on where you're at on them, right? They range between 60 to 180 miles or something down near the equator. Anyway, up around the Mediterranean, it's right around 40 to 60 miles apart. And so if you're off by 1 point and you hang a left, you might hit their thing that pokes out of the end of Italy, or you might completely miss that entire part of the ocean. And that's the difference. You could sail out into freaking nothing and never see Italy. It's crazy.
And another interesting thing in that same vein, actually, the obviously hundreds and hundreds of years were spent and millions of man hours trying to devise a marine chronometer that would work aboard ship and not lose time immediately after you left your home port, because obviously you need to know what time it is in the place you left in order to plot your longitude accurately. But a couple hundred years before John Harrison, Galileo had the idea, shortly after he had discovered the moons of Jupiter, to use the moons of Jupiter as a marine chronometer themselves, because that's the one set of celestial objects in the sky whose motions repeat at reliable intervals that can be predicted. And the only problem was that not enough people you've obviously got the pitching and rolling that a ship does on the ocean, and nobody has a good enough telescope anyway to be able to, and obviously you can only do it at night, but it was still probably the most credible idea along that same vein that was ever proposed up until 1850 and John Harrison and the first successful marine chronometer. And everybody hated John Harrison for the success of that invention because he was just some lowly amateur watchmaker who didn't have any educational credentials, didn't have any title, didn't have a famous last name. You're just some idiot from the sticks.
This is kind of like, in my opinion, the invention of dynamite. Homie was like, we need to build a tunnel through a mountain. Boom. Let's use this to kill people. No, we use it to build a tunnel through the mountain. Boom. Damn, you killed a bunch of people. Stop that. Right? But with the chronometer, it allowed everything from the entire slave system was largely built off of it, because without the ability to return directly to the same location, you can't set up a report to buy slaves and start sugar plantations. That whole thing. Thank you. Apparently I'm the one.
We've always known you were the one.
Apparently,
but yeah, and then of course by the early years of the 20th century, we thought we had eliminated all the danger from ocean travel. As Captain Joseph Smith of the Titanic basically famously said, I cannot envisage any scenario in which one of our modern ships, like the one I captained, would ever be caused to founder. They just couldn't conceive of it. They thought they had cracked everything. No ship was ever going to sink again. And we know how that, and that's part of the reason why the sinking of the Titanic was such an incredible shock to the public at large, because the public at large believed all these things that they heard these people saying who were supposed to be eminent authorities on maritime matters. And if these guys are saying it's impossible for a ship to sink now, then they must be right. And of course, that was the ushering in of a whole new world, because up until then, an ocean voyage, you had a significantly non-zero chance of dying on the way, like way the hell more than 5%.
And it didn't even have to have anything to do with a sinking ship or a problem with the ship. You could get fucking the plague from the rats on the ship and your ass is toast. Catch a cold, your ass is toast.
Absolutely. And it was perfectly normal if you had, say 100 people on a ship on a 3-week long voyage, at least a couple of them would die. It was just a matter of course that people just died on ocean voyages. You were lucky if
about Magellan
didn't die.
Was Magellan the guy that was sent home pickled in rum? Or was that Admiral Nelson? Was Magellan the guy that got sent home pickled in rum?
Oh, that's Nelson.
Admiral Nelson. Okay. All right. I don't know why I thought it was Magellan.
It was actually brandy. But he was counting.
That's a significant thing. That's very different. In fact, that's big.
And that was a special circumstance, because obviously the standard procedure would have been to do a burial at sea and just dump him over the side in a respectable fashion. But the men to whom command of the fleet fell after Nelson's death were saying, if we arrive back home without Nelson's body, now that we've won this victory and he's basically the greatest naval hero in British history, we have to find a way to preserve this cadaver until we get back home. And one of the ship's surgeons got assigned the task to figure this out. We need to preserve this body as best we can. Just devise some kind of procedure using whatever we have on board. And it was a large cask of brandy that was decided. And I think he put some other kind of preservatives into the cask along with the brandy. And it wound up working pretty well from all reports that the body arrived in rather splendid condition. And Nelson, of course, had his magnificent state funeral in St. Paul's Cathedral, attended by the king and all of the dukes and earls and nobles and all the great and good of the empire and the realm, and where he, of course, still lies today in the marble sarcophagus that was originally intended for Henry VIII. Fun fact. That is the resting place of Nelson. Or are we doing the thing?
The thing is doing.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you ever so much for joining us here on the Blast Radius tonight. We do apologize for the technical difficulties that resulted in the monologue being so fragmented and strangely slow off the top during the first part, but we'll get those difficulties sorted before next week. You have our word. We hope you have a great day tomorrow and a fantastic rest of your evening tonight, as a matter of fact. Great day tomorrow. Edifying day afterward. Magnificent rest of your week. We will see you back here next Sunday, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific, as we always do. Maybe I'll even have a fresh chapter of This Week in History for you. And maybe Lita Ford will join us. Who the hell knows? Strange things happen. See you next time. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.